Hello and welcome back to another episode of Notion Bonsai, and today we're going to be working on some ficus bonsai. We're going to be giving them a spring repot and some light pruning to take them just that little step further into becoming a great bonsai. So these are all of the ficus bonsai that we're going to be working on in this video. There is 5 trees in total, some of various species, types, sizes, so you can really apply the methods that I use in this video on your own ficus bonsai just to help improve the progress in a bonsai design. So we got ficus ginseng, some cuttings off that ginseng. Another popular one is ficus benjamina. I really like these ones because they've got these beautiful small leaves, and also this little tree that I'm training to become a mame small bonsai. So let's start with this giant ginseng one. And now before we begin, the bonsai tools that I'll be using in this video today are some root pruning shears, a chopstick, a grafting knife, some branch cutters, twig cutters, a root rake or a bent fork, some wire cutters, and some gin pliers. And now by no means do you need all of these specialized tools to be able to do bonsai. If you're new to bonsai, you can get by with a cheap pair of garden scissors or some secateurs. A bent fork and a chopstick's pretty easy to pick up. Just make sure that whatever tools that you do use are clean and sharp. Clean because you don't want to introduce any bacterial or fungal infections to your trees, and sharp because a clean cut tends to heal a lot faster and more efficiently than a blunt cut that's sort of been squashed by a dull pair of scissors. So when it comes to styling a bonsai, there's many different things that you can do because it all really depends on what you want to do with the tree. For example, if I liked the bottom part of this tree, I could keep it, prune the top back, and just develop the tree from there every year, pruning it back, letting it grow, pruning it back, letting it grow. And over this repetition of pruning it over and over, you will get a lovely ramified branch structure on the top. I would like to do that with this tree, but there's just one problem that I have with this ginseng, and it is just that. It's the fact that it's a ginseng. I'm not the biggest fan of these bulbous roots on the bottom of these trees. And there's a couple of different options and things you can do. I have seen Nigel Saunders from the Bonsai Zone actually scar the bulbous roots on the ginseng, and it can look quite nice, and it creates a really interesting pattern on the bottom as if there's roots. I could do that with this tree, but instead I think I would just like the tree to start from this point. So for that reason, I'm going to air layer this tree today. So I want this air layering to start around here. As you can see, there's actually a little leaf growing from the old species of whatever this was down here before it was grafted with Ficus microcarpa on top. But we are not going to need this, so I'm just going to cut that off. So I'm just going to take the knife and stab it into the trunk and go the entire way around the tree. You will see the ficus begin to bleed. This is quite common for this species. So I did the first ring around the tree, and now I'm going to do the second one. You want to come down about the same thickness as the trunk is wide, so say that much there. So we're going to come down to about here, and you do this just so that when the tree heals, it's not able to bridge the gap between the two cuts. Otherwise the air layer just simply wouldn't work. And then once we did the 2 cuts, I'm just going to cut a line down and hopefully peel off the bark. And I find that the cleaner you can get the top line on the air layer, the more successful and evenly distributed the roots are when they do come out. The bottom line down here isn't as important. And now it's extremely crucial when doing an air layering that after you remove the bark of the tree, there's this white layer under the bark, as you can see here. That is called the cambium layer. It's very important that you remove the cambium also, and you only leave the wood of the tree, because if you don't remove this cambium, the top of the tree won't sort of go into emergency mode where it thinks, we're not getting any nutrients, we gotta send out more roots here. Instead, it will just be chilling, thinking everything's completely fine. So you really want to remove all the cambium the whole way around. As you can see, there's lots of it coming off. It's quite thick on a ficus. On other trees, normally it's quite a thin layer, but on the ficus, as you can see, it's coming off almost like plastic. And now that all the bark and cambium has been removed, I'm going to add some rooting hormone to this part of the tree. And I find it makes quite a big difference if you use a rooting hormone powder that has the active ingredient IBA, also known as indole 3-butyric acid. And this sort of acts like a synthetic form of the natural hormone auxin, which is found in trees. I don't like to use it directly out of the container either. It's good to take it from that and transfer it into a little tub like this. That way you don't get any contamination into your hormone powder. And when painting it onto the tree, it can be quite tempting to want to paint it on this wood part, but this actually isn't where the roots come from. The roots come from above that, up here. So that's where I'm going to paste the hormone, and you don't need much of it. The percentage of IBA in this one is 0.25%, and I find that works great for air layerings like this. I'm going to do that the whole way around the tree. Now I'm going to take some of this. This is what's known as sphagnum moss, and by wrapping the tree in some wet sphagnum like this allows roots to form pretty easily into a bag of moss. Because the sphagnum moss that I have is quite dehydrated, I'm just going to leave it in a little bowl of water for about 5 minutes just to reabsorb all the water. And now while that's soaking, I'm going to take some plastic, just a length of plastic that will cover the whole way around the trunk like this. And this plastic is actually a little bit too long, so I'm going to cut it. And now, just laying the plastic flat, I'm going to take some of this wet sphagnum, and you don't want it to be absolutely soaking, you just want it to be damp. I'm going to sit it on top of the plastic like this. This is going to go around 1/2 of the trunk. We can just take this, and I'm just going to come around the back of the trunk like this. And you want to make sure there's lots of contact with the moss on this upper piece of the trunk, because remember, that's where the roots are coming from. But you also want a good lot of roots underneath so that when the roots do grow, they have lots of space to grow into. And now with a piece of scrap wire, or you could use a string, I'm going to wrap this around the tree at the bottom and top. Just before I continue to wrap the bag around, I'm going to take a little bit more sphagnum and put it on this side. This can be really tricky and fidgety if it is your first time doing this. I've done this so much now that it's pretty easy, but it does take a little bit of practice, so don't lose patience as you're doing this. This is probably, I'd say, 1.5 mil wire. Just twist it on. I'm going to take these gin pliers just to help me tighten the wire, but remember, when you tighten it here, you don't want to tighten it so much that it bites into the trunk, just enough so that it's airtight in the bag, because all that moisture that's in there is going to stay there until the roots go in. If you find that the moss is drying out as it's sitting in your garden or your house, you can just water in the top of it to keep there consistently moist. And I find the sphagnum moss works really great for air layers because it is both antifungal and antibacterial. So as the roots are forming, there's really no chance of bad fungus ruining your roots on you. I'm going to take more moss and just feed it in the top. The more moss in there, the more space the roots have to grow into. And tighten that off. Alright, so we're going to check back up in this tree if and when this tree takes root. And now moving on to this next tree, I believe this is the tree last year that we planted on a rock just to see how the roots would develop. So I'm going to take this out of the pot just to have a little peek at the roots. And as I can see from the bottom of this pot here, there are some roots coming out the bottom, so it wouldn't be a bad idea to repot this tree anyway. Alright, that came out pretty easily. We didn't plant it over a rock to create a root over rock style bonsai. We just simply wanted to get a flat nibari. So let's take this out and have a little peek. So it did fill the pot, which is a really good sign. And the rock here is still there underneath. Let's take that out. And that's created a lovely flat nibari for us. I'm just going to take the chopstick and rake it out. So it didn't put on a whole lot of root growth, but it did in some areas here. As you can see, it's quite long. There's some here that went out and down, so perhaps this tree is in a too small of a pot, meaning the rim's too small, because when the roots grow out, they hit the side and go down. So maybe a shallower pot, but with a wider rim. Let's just give these roots a little wash to see what's going on. The tree put on a good bit of root growth on this half, but on the other half here, it is lacking quite a bit. So I am going to balance the growth of the roots today just by pruning the extra long ones and allowing this side of the root base to catch up. And this should, in time, develop a really nice, even nibari. And in bonsai, the word nibari simply refers to the surface roots or root spread of the tree. And it's what makes it look powerful and established in the pot. So just taking the root pruning shears, I'm going to cut, sort of do a profile cut around the root base. just to balance the energy. There's this extra long one here we got to remove. So we really didn't remove much, just a little bit of roots here and there. And this is what's left. We got a nice even nabari. And now I don't want to plant this back into the same pot, because when I put this in here, it is restricted by the edges of the pot and it doesn't really do the tree any good. I want a pot that's nice and shallow but wide. So what I'm going to use for this, just to train the tree in, is this little cat bowl. So it just goes to show you can use quite a lot of things for bonsai pots. Just be aware that this might not be frost proof. That's why I'm planting it with the tropical tree, because this will be kept indoors. I simply took a ceramic drill bit, drilled some holes on the bottom here, and then I've wired in some bonsai mesh. And I think this will do a great job at providing a little bit more space around here for the root base. And for this, I'm just putting in some of the old soil, which is a mix of pumice, akadama, and lava rock. The tree was doing quite happily in this before, so there's really no need to change it. And because this pot is so shallow, we don't actually need to do the rock trick with this one. We could if we wanted to, I guess. Let's see how it would work. I mean, we could, but I think that puts the tree a little too high in the pot. So I'm going to do without this one. I'm going to take one of the old pieces of wire that we just took off the last pot and use this to wire the tree in. So I'm going to feed it up through the bottom, just like that. Got the wire here, just with a little bit more soil. Nice base layer. We can now just wire this tree in, and it's got a lovely flat nabari. As you wire the tree in, you don't want to squash any of these nice roots with the wire, so you can just take your time to weave the wire between all the spaces in the roots before you get it to a nice anchor point, like here. Then we can just tie this in. So I'm going to give it a little twist with my hands first. Then with the gin pliers, we can just tighten it a little further. I don't want to tighten it too much because it may start to bite into the trunk. I think it's okay there. Some people like to clip these little ties on the end. I'm going to keep them because this tree isn't going to any exhibition or anything. And I think if you keep them, it's just a little easier to remove. Because this is quite a small bonsai, I'm going to use a finer grit bonsai soil just for the top. Now moving up to the top of this tree, I would like to keep this as quite a small tree, almost a mame-sized bonsai, because I just feel like this little tree would work best like that. So let's see how small we can get this. Here there's two branches coming from the one spot, as you can see. And if we leave both of these branches to grow, we will get what's known as inverse taper, which is a swelling in that area of the trunk. We could remove both these branches altogether and have this as the trunk line. We could remove this and have that little mini one as the trunk line. We could remove these and have that as the trunk line. It all really depends on how you want it to look. So I'm going to take these branch cutters. I'll start by chopping this down because I don't want the tree this big. Say there. I quite like how it comes out and splits like that, but I don't like how this little one comes up here. I want to encourage the branches to flare out, and I feel like this one in the middle is just too much. And then just to push the growth back even further, I'm going to cut this to here. So I've got a little mini tree, and that's all I'm going to do in that tree for now. And of course, if you decide you want to take cuttings off this trees, you can just strip off the bottom leaves. You can leave this cutting in a glass of water if you wish to, and within a few weeks or months, this will develop roots. Or you can dip it into some hormone rooting powder with IBA and then stick it into soil, and again, it should root. I have found the Ficus microcarpa doesn't really root as quickly as the Ficus benjamina. Different species root at different rates, but you can try it yourself and let me know in the comments how it goes for you. Moving on to the next tree, based on the amount of roots that were on the last tree, I don't really want to go around repotting every single one of these trees today because I just want to let the roots do their thing, get really healthy before I can come in and really work on them. So all I'm going to do is work on the top of these trees today. And looking at this, I can see it's got quite a good leader on the top. I would like this to become quite a tall and thick ficus bonsai. Maybe to get a little bit of taper, I could cut this leader off and allow this branch to become the new leader. That way we get some movement and interest on the tree. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. So we'll cut it to here. Now we get that sort of, this will be the new leader. So I want the trunk to flow pretty seamlessly into this new branch. I'm just going to cut it like this, just a little bit at a time. You don't want to go too much. Just a little cleanup at the bottom here. And then the same on top. And as this tree grows, I'd like the tree to put more energy into the top. So if I just take off the ends of these branches, not only will this create taper and interest in these branches, but it will also mean the tree's putting more energy into the top because it's got a terminal bud here, and the tree's just going to want to shoot up. This one's going sort of out and then up, where I want to encourage it going outward instead by a clip and grow. So I can take this off, and I would like maybe, I don't know if this branch works anymore, maybe we can just cut it here and see if we can get some back buds on it. And for this big wound here, you don't really need to use cut putty on ficus because they sort of release their own sap, and when that hardens, it acts like its own cut putty. Moving on to this next tree. This tree has put on a lot of growth since last year. When I pruned it, it was this sort of little bush that didn't really look like anything, and in the space of just 1 year, as you can see, it's got lots of growth the whole way around. And I don't know if you remember, but this tree is actually 3 trees fused together at the base. Well, I'm attempting to fuse them anyway. I ended up cutting some of the bark off some of the areas, then stuck a toothpick the whole way through all the trunks in the hopes that they'd fuse. I have no idea how this is looking in the root base, but regardless of how it looks, it definitely needs up potted in order to get them trunks to thicken and fuse even more into each other. So let's get this out of the pot. All right, okay, this tree's put on so much growth, and even the potting mesh that I had in the bottom of the pot has been eaten by the roots. See if we can get this out. Alright, so I'm just going to dig down a little, loosen up all the roots, just to see what's going on at the point that it's fusing. So these trees really look like they're holding themselves together. I've got no wire on this that's holding them there, and they're all fused pretty nicely. So the idea did work with the toothpick, although I probably wouldn't do it with a toothpick again, because I remember someone in the comments saying when that toothpick wood rots, it's probably not good long term. I'm just keeping a spray bottle nearby so I can mist the roots as I work on them, because if the roots of the tree are allowed to dry out, especially if it's a hot or windy day when you're working on them, if they dry out, then them roots are essentially dead and in turn can kill your nice bonsai. So you want to keep them roots nice and hydrated. And now with these roots, I'm just going to take off the extra thick ones that are growing straight downwards. So there's one here. There's a little bit of root connected to that. That's completely okay. Just going to give it a basic prune along the bottom also. So really that's all I'm going to take off this tree. I don't want to take off too much right now, as I really want to just get this trunk nice and thick, and I want all these trees to really merge and fuse at the base where there has like a big thick flat nebari. And over the course of a few years of repotting this in a big pot and pruning the roots to encourage more lateral growing ones, this tree should develop a nice thick trunk and nebari. I don't want to up pot this into a pot from this to something that's crazy big. You want to incrementally up pot a tree so that there isn't too much moisture in the pot that will rot the roots over time. So I'm going to take this tree from this little pot to this slightly larger one, and I don't really want to have to wire this tree in, so I am going to put it nice and deep in the pot just so that it remains stable. So just using some of the old soil, there's no problem by doing this. And if I sit it about this deep, this should be pretty good for the tree. Then with the chopstick, I'll work it into place, working out any air gaps that's in the soil. I'm not going to take off any foliage on the top because I just want to let all this allow the tree to thicken. If we prune the top, it will set the tree back a little while, so it will have to recover from that in order to put on more growth. But if you just leave this on the top, it'll just take off and get thicker so much faster. There is just one little branch I'd like to get rid of. Just at the base of the trunk here, there's a few branches, thin branches that's crossing, and if allowed to grow, we'll get a weird trunk line and structure to the tree. Just imagine these little branches a lot thicker. I just don't think it would look good, so for that reason, I'm going to remove these. And that's all I'm going to do in terms of branch pruning for this tree. And now moving on to this final tree, which is a clump style Mame bonsai. Although as it stands right now, I wouldn't say this is a Mame tree. It's grown a little bit too big. So I want to try and make this tree as compact as possible by pruning it right back. So with this top one here, I could prune that right down to here, just pruning it back to some leaves. With this one, I could prune right back to here. Let's see what we can do around this way. There's a little branch coming off to the side of there. We could prune it to that. This one I could prune right back to here. So we're trying to get this nice and compact. Again, in bonsai, things do look worse before they look better, so it will look like I've just destroyed the tree. I'm going to prune this back to the first leaf here. I can even prune that back to there. And I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not really going to do any root work on this tree today, but I am going to take it out of this pot because this is a terracotta pot and it has been indoors, and as you can see on the bottom here, there is some mold and fungus on this pot. I'm constantly washing it off in my house, but it just keeps coming back. There isn't as much ventilation indoors as there is outdoors for terracotta pots, so I wouldn't really advise having a terracotta pot indoors. Over the last year, it hasn't really done this tree any harm. It just looks a little bit unsightly. You know, on second thoughts, I would say by looking at simply the root structure of this tree, the roots are pretty good as they are. And because I want this to be a nice little mame-sized tree without growing it really tall, I could consider this tree almost finished. All I have to do is build a nice branch structure on top. So today, I'm not going to put this into this plastic pot. I'm going to put it into a nice bonsai pot. And this is the little pot that I have chosen for this tree. It's a lovely little blue glazed ceramic pot. I already got some bonsai mesh in the bottom there. So let's put some soil in. And because I'm keeping these trees indoors, I don't really need to wire these, as I don't need to worry about wind or anything like that. I think this looks so much better, and all that's left to do now is give all the trees a water. And on that, I'm going to end off this video right here. If you enjoyed, please be sure to leave a like in this video. It really helps out the channel a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And let me know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Perhaps there's something you would have done differently with your ficus. I'm always open to new and different ideas in bonsai. If you would like to support me and the things that I do on this channel, hit the thanks button down below. And if you'd like to become a channel member, hit the join button. That way you'll be able to see videos before they go out to everyone else. And if you'd like to stay updated on all the things that I do off camera, please follow me on Instagram. It's @NotionBonsai, and you'll be able to see all the things that I do on there. But on that, thank you so very much for watching.